In this clip, we'll learn how to correct baking issues by adding custom paint to our normal map and ambient occlusion map. All right, great. So we finished baking all the additional maps in the last clip. Now, in between clips, I've focused here on the eye geometry because there's an issue, and it exists because of one, the fact that we overlapped the UVs for the eyes, and two, the fact that the eyes are part of the body texture set. Essentially what has happened here is we now have normal detail from the opening for the eye socket that has been baked into the eye shell itself. Now, because of the way that I've overlapped these UVs, you really can't see it inside our 3D viewport. However, if this character were to move his eyes, that texture would move and it would become visible. So the fact that this is even here, that means we should fix this. This shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have any of this normal detail on the eye geometry. So the problem here lies in that we have baked this normal map from the high resolution mesh, and it really only exists right now here inside my project tab of the shelf. The layer stack itself does not contain any representation of this normal map. So we could come in here and we could begin to create information and say, hey, I want this to be normal information, and it's probably not going to work. Let me show you how. Now we're going to dive in and start creating some layers pretty quickly here, but we're going to slow down in the next module and start to learn a little bit more in detail about what we're doing. So sit back and watch, follow along if you'd like, but I'm going to come in, create a layer group, and I'm going to drop in a fill layer. I'm going to drag the fill layer over into the layer group, and we're going to double click the layer group name and call this something like Bake Fixes. All right, great. So we can call this fill layer something like normal map. And if we came over here with this selected and looked in our properties panel, we're going to come in here and just deselect this layer's contribution to all of the channels except for normal. So if we came in here, just like so, you can see we have sort of this normal purple here. However, it's not replacing any of the detail from our normal map at all. Even though we've told this, hey, we want you to contribute to the normal channel. Let's do this. Let's jump over here into the texture set settings. And you can see here we have this normal map connected here. I want to point your attention to this little setting right up here called normal mixing. Now, by default, the mixing of normal details, the way that Substance Painter is going to handle that is it's going to combine. So any details that we paint inside of our layer stack are going to be combined with this map. That's really not what we want to do in the case of the eye and fixing this. We actually want to remove that detail altogether. So what we need to do is we need to come in and change our normal mixing from combine to replace. Now look what happens. As soon as I do that, we lose all of that normal detail that was in the body. You can see it's gone. Let's jump back over here to our properties panel with our fill layer selected. And you can see here we can connect either a color or an image to this normal input. Let's jump over to our shelf here. And again, inside of our project category, let's find our normal map for the body and simply drag it over and drop it right on top of that lighter gray rectangle that says normal uniform color. Just like so. All right, so we've got some semblance of our normal map back, but it looks different. Something isn't quite right. So I want to point something else out to you. Look at what happened now. We can see seams in our normal map. So this is, again, something that relates to color space. And if you remember, we set our normal maps up in the beginning of this project to be OpenGL normal maps. Well, we've dropped in our normal map, and if we come over here and select this little arrow right here, advanced options, you're going to see a color space. By default, this is going to be set to auto. This is not what we want. Let's come in and explicitly define this as an OpenGL normal map. Okay, now we're on track. Now we're good. So what this means, now that we have the normal map living on a layer, as opposed to being piped in from the baked additional maps, is we can come in and we can hide that detail just simply by hiding the layer. Not only can we hide this detail, but we can mask this detail. Let's come in here and let's just drop in a layer mask onto that normal map layer. We'll click this button here inside the layer panel, and I'm going to add a white mask. Now again, white is going to reveal all of the details. So nothing happened here inside of our 3D viewport or our 2D viewport. That's exactly as expected. But what we can now do is we could take our paintbrush and we could come in and we could begin to paint into this layer mask. Now notice I have the mask selected here. We don't want the fill layer selected. You can see here how the properties panel changes when I select either one. A little bit different, right? So we could come in here and we could adjust the size of our brush like so, and we could come in and begin to paint out those normal details just like that. Now I want to be a little more efficient. I want to fill this shell. So I'm going to use another tool besides the paintbrush to do that. Substance Painter has this really great tool called the Polygon Fill tool, and it's right over here. We're going to actually use this quite a bit in this course. You can see it's up here in the toolbar. Let's select that, and you'll notice that we get a red wireframe on top of the asset. So let's come over to the Properties panel, and you can see here with this tool we have a fill mode, and you can see we can do triangle fill, quad fill, polygon fill, object fill or mesh fill, and UV chunk fill. Now it makes me laugh to say that, but really what that is UV shell fill. So let's do that. Let's choose UV chunk fill, and now we select a color. Now by default it's white. I'm going to come over and move this to black, and I'm simply going to click and drag into that shell. And you can see all the normal detail went away. I'll go ahead and, for good measure, do the same thing on the back side of the eye there. Perfect. So let's go ahead and just grab the paintbrush to make the wireframe go away. And you can see all that normal detail has now been masked out. That's exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to get rid of the detail just on that eye shell. Now, in doing so, we can see that the ambient occlusion is doing the same thing. If that eye were to animate and move around, then we would maybe potentially see that ambient occlusion detail. That's not a good thing. So let's get rid of it. We'll do the exact same thing. I'm going to come in here and create another fill layer, just like so. And we're going to come in and, oh, wait. We don't have ambient occlusion as a channel. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and turn all these off, just like so. Let's come back over here to our texture set settings, and you can see base color, height, roughness, metallic, normal. Well, we don't have an ability to contribute to the ambient occlusion map. We can add a custom channel here. So let's do that. Let's come over here and add a channel for ambient occlusion, just like so. And now when we come back over to our properties panel, we can select this fill layer, and we can tell Substance Painter, we want you to contribute to the ambient occlusion channel. Perfect. So now let's do the same thing. Let's come over to our shelf under project, find our ambient occlusion map for the body, just like we did with the normal map. Drag it over into this ambient occlusion box right here. And, well, okay. Let's go ahead and create a mask. We'll create a white mask, just like we did before. We could name this something like AO. But before we begin to paint into this mask, I want to show you that, again, over here in the texture set settings, we have ambient occlusion mixing. By default, this is going to mess you up. It's set to multiply. So any details we paint are going to be multiplied against the ambient occlusion map we baked. Well, that's not a good thing. Let's go ahead and choose replace. Just like so. All right, now we're in business. Let's go ahead and grab our polygon fill tool again. Make sure our mask is selected. and simply come over here and make sure we're using black and the UV chunk fill. And we'll come in and mask out the details on those two shells, just like so. And perfect. We've now removed all traces of the ambient occlusion map and the normal map from the eye geometry, something that will be incredibly important if these eyes were to animate. All right, so let's take a moment to discuss what we've learned in this module. So we've learned how to create a project in Substance Painter to work in. We've also learned how to spot issues with vertex normals for our asset and then jump over into Maya and fix them. We've learned how to bake supporting maps for our Substance Painter project. And we've learned how to solve some issues that may arise in our baked maps and repair those. Now, at this point, go ahead and take a look at your own game asset and begin to think about the vertex normals and look for some opportunities to define explicit hard edges where they may be needed. Once you've finished doing that, jump over into Substance Painter and bake all of your supporting maps. Now, at this point, if you need any feedback on these maps that you've baked, feel free to jump onto Unity Connect and post some screenshots of your results.